Hi there, it's Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder here with a standard metagame update with how Forgotten Realms has affected the format. So I used to do these videos a long time ago and I want to get back to those roots of analyzing the new metas. We're going to look at standard. I'm not going to look at modern or pioneer or historic or pauper or any of those formats. We're going to focus with this video on standard and see where we're at, see if there's any cards that have impacted the format and where we go from here. Of course, there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of experimentation that still has time for the set. So I don't think anything's set in stone, but we are starting to see a metagame appear for the cards that did come out from Forgotten Realms. This also gives us a glimpse into the future with possible post-rotation decks. So we're going to have this is the last set before we have rotation, and so many of these cards that are powerful enough in this standard are obviously going to be powerful enough for the next standard. So maybe I'll do a companion piece on the Rogue market showing which of these cards may be investable, quote unquote may, because standard has been kind of a weird format where it really hasn't been the breadwinner. It's been modern or commander, and then that's basically what is something that is going to go up in value. Everything else is going to go down in value. But we might see a kind of return to normal. Maybe people will like standard in the next rotation. Maybe we'll have, Grand Prix and tournament structures and stuff like that. And if that's the case, then standard cards absolutely can go up in value. All right, so let's just get down to it. First of all, we have, according to the metagame here on MTGO, we do have mono green mid-range. That is showing up as the most played deck that has actually had finishes show up. And right off the bat, there is two cards that are affecting this deck that are very, very good for this deck. The first one is being the Werewolf Pack Leader. This is actually a super, super strong card from Forgotten Realms. It's a 3/3 for 3, and it's got the pack tactics of when it is attacked with creatures with total power 6 or greater, you draw a card. It's exactly what mono green needs in a deck like this: is ability to have some staying power, be able to continue to refill the hand. It also can pump itself for 4 up to a 5/3, and it is a card that is eligible for Gemraiser. Gemraiser is getting better because it still does kill some of the enchantment creatures that are still in this format. It does kill like the Skyclaves and the Emberclaves and whatnot. And there are some problematic enchantments and artifacts that Gemraiser. But what's really good about Gemraiser is it does have the synergy of the Swarm Shambler, and with, if you run the Snake, this particular wrist isn't running the Snake, but some of the other ones are running the Snake in that slot too. So you do have the 1-drop that has a 1/1 counter on it, and then the Gemraiser pumps it up to a 5/5, and so it's a nice on-curve type card. So this is just your typical kind of stompy deck with the usual suspects. This deck has kind of been tier 2 for quite a while. It does have some neat little tricks. For the majority of this deck does seem to suffer from rotation, though. You lose the Lovestruck Beast, you lose the Gemraiser, the Questing Beast, and we don't lose the Swarm Shambler, but the Swarm Shambler does get weaker with many of those cards out of it, and we do lose like the Primal Might. Blizzard Brawl does stick around, the Chariot does stick around, Great Henge goes away, but typically we've seen some other cards in this slot for drawing cards. The other addition is this Rangers class. A lot of decks have been experimenting with this card. I actually like it. It's a 2/2 for 2, so it's a bear, and it feels like 2 cards in 1 because you can actually play an enchantment, and it says whenever you attack put a +1 counter on target attacking creature, which actually does have some decent synergy with many of these cards. The first one I really like is like Lair of the Hydra. So late game, you pump it, it's going to continue to get bigger and bigger every time you attack in and get that Ranger class. And I mean, you can put as much mana into this to begin with, but it does get that pump. And then if you do get up to 4, so very late game, you can start casting cards off the top of your library. So it really is an all-in-one toolbox for the deck with a reasonable 2/2 for 2 that you can get more value as time goes on with this card. So I'm thinking that these two are going to be a nice little shell for a stompy base deck in the future, especially if one of these sets out of like the Innistrad sets have a +1/+1 counter type effect. Then you also have the Swarm Shambler that is looking really good post-rotation for that. So usually when the first week people are playing a lot of aggros, there still is many decks though that are anti-aggro, or we have a lot of board wipes and stuff. So the resilience of Rangers class is a good sign for this particular deck. I don't know if the going clear over into, I guess this one does have Faceless Haven, so it's double animation lands. That's pretty cool actually. So this one, I think that this little package is definitely going to be good post rotation, and so these are something to keep your eye out for post-rotation. So go back to the next one. We don't have any changes with Sultai Control or Mono Red or Black-Green Sacrifice. There was an interesting card for Black-Green Sacrifice that I did show up in some other, black-red sacrifice, which is the 5/2 dragon. We'll look at it in a second because there was another list that did show it. So basically it's a 5/2 with flash. You can cast it from your graveyard if another creature not named the dragon died this turn. So it's kind of interesting with Woe Strider. You can sacrifice something on your turn and then end up casting it. Amberstorm Predator does stick around. Woe Strider does not. Croaks is one of the main things for this deck. This is a card that's not sticking around, but many of these other cards are sticking around, like the Village Rites and I've claimed the Firstborn, I believe, is claiming to be legal. Maybe it's not going to be legal because it's not. Yeah, it's just in the Mystical Archive. But I'm sure there'll be some other ways to grab creatures at that point. But anyway, this deck could have the inclusion of that dragon. I think just like even a 1/of in this deck, or we might go back to the variations of decks running the Mire Triton and the other enchantment that mills up to 6 cards, and then that gives you a way to mill the dragon, the 5/2 flash dragon, then cast it. We've seen these versions before in this black-red sacrifice. I think the black-red sacrifice did well this week because a lot of creature-based decks. This is typically an anti-creature-based deck. It's got a miserable matchup against the Sultai Control, so that's why you've seen it weed out against it. But it's very good versus mono white. It has an exceptional matchup versus mono white, pretty decent versus mono red as well, and any other type of mid-range deck like that mono green deck. It seems to do pretty well. So we might see a resurgence back in this deck. Post rotation, though, it does struggle. It loses some very key cards. I mean, red decks in general are going to struggle with the Bone Crusher Giant being lost. They're going to have to kind of find kind of what they want to be. This card does everything you want a card to be. It's one of the best cards ever printed with a 2 damage shock built into a 4/3 body. So we'll have to wait and see how they work post rotation. Next up is Mono White Aggro. There are a couple of additions to Mono White Aggro from this set that I've seen in lists. The first one, there's a 3/1 dog with Vigilance that is basically the reprint of the Night of White Orchid. I can't find it. We'll see it here in a second as well. I think I saw it on another list that we'll be taking a look at. But that seems to be one of the more powerful cards from the set that should be a good rotated card. Any 3/1 for 2 mana is going to be very good, especially if it can actually get you additional land out of the mix, and the Vigilance on a 3/1 is also quite good. I didn't see anything else in this particular list of where this is another one you might start to see the Snow-Covered Plains, the Faceless Haven, and then you have the 3/4 land that you can animate, 3/4 flying land. So now you have access to many flying or many animation lands, which is exactly like a mono white and a mono green typically need. It gives them that kind of go long ability. And typically white decks are going to have to get away from this Lurrus route, but I mean, a lot of the cards that worked with Lurrus are rotating anyway. And we did see, let's go back over here to the meta on this recent decks. There was a white deck that was using all new cards. Let me try to find it again here. Of the white decks that were not running Lurrus, and they basically a deck that was rotation proof. And I think mono white is actually in pretty decent shape post rotation, as it still has the Skyclave Apparition, still has the elite Spellweaver or Spellbinder, and it still has a lot of cards that are going. So elite Spellbinder sticks around. This is an interesting list. I don't think that this is going to last long term. This 5/0 finish here by Donkey Punch. It does have the Eben Death Draco-Lich I was talking about. This also seems like one of the more powerful cards. This might end up seeing play in self-mill strategies for black. We still have the Mire Triton. We still have like I said, the enchantment. We still have other ways to mill, and then ways to sacrifice and get a 5/2 back. Doesn't seem that seems right on par with where a lot of the other cards are. It's a pretty good. That's an aggressive card. Dies to like shocks and stuff, but it's a renewable resource. It's very easy to exploit. So we have the Elite Spellbinder, like I said, that's sticking around. And Loyal Warhound, that was a card I was talking about earlier. We have the Luminarch Aspirant that's sticking around. So this is kind of like an adventure deck where it's trying to get to this Asuraric, the Archlich, that when it attacks, it puts out a 2/2 zombie for 3 mana. So you're going through the dungeon until you're ready. You cast this for 3. I think it's a cute deck. I actually don't think it's going to stick around, though. So let me see if I can find some of these other decks that I was looking at for. Here's one that was very interesting. As far as a rotation-proof deck, the only card that I saw in the creatures is this Drannith Magistrate, which Drannith Magistrate actually gets weaker anyway. If it was going to stick around for post-rotation, it's still good versus the Kaldheim cards that you're casting from your exile zone. But other than that, casting cards from either Companion or Adventure Zone is what Dramatic Magistrate's really been good at shutting down. Without those out of the mix, it already loses a lot of its power. So this deck is trying to cast multiple spells in a turn to kind of exploit the Code Spell Cleric and the Monk of the Open Hand that get better and better with more cards being cast, and also this Clarion Spirit, same thing, it pumps out a 1/1 if you can cast multiple spells in a turn. We have the Paladin's Class 2, which is slowing our opponent down for like board wipes. You can spells on your turn cost 1 more, and then if you can get it up to its Glorious Anthem for 3, and then you can get up even higher at the 5. Whenever you attack until end of turn, target attacking creature gets +1 for each other attacking creature and double strike. So it actually can finish off the game with kind of a go wide strategy, which it seems like this deck is trying to do with this Clarion Spirit and a bunch of 1-drops. So I've seen other decks like this that mono white seems super good. Like I said before, they could go into the higher land count with Faceless Haven, the Snow-Covered Plains, and the other animation land. And then still kind of run this low to the ground type strategy with a very good 1-drop with the 2/1 Usher the Fallen. Many other good 1-drops that I think are still going to be good post rotation. But you still have the Luminarch Aspirant, and you still have the Skyclave Apparition, you still have the equipment, the Maul of the Skyclave, which I think is already there for a very aggressive mono white strategy. You got the Legion Angel as well that can fill back up your hand. And so yeah, this one is going to be a deck that easily is going to be able to be there post rotation. So mono red's the big one that I think it's very weak post rotation. Loses Embercleave, loses Bone Crusher Giant, loses Torbran, loses basically everything that makes mono red. So that's the one. Might make mono white a little bit. Well, this version actually wasn't the greatest versus mono red to begin with. It's a life gain version that does not survive rotation. That I think just gets worse anyway without its big deck that it beats up on with basically Gruul aggro and mono red aggro. But anyway, that was another deck that I did see some new cards in here. So let's go back to the metagame for Standard and look at some of the other ones. The other one that caught my eye was this Prismari mid-range deck did have access to some new dragons here. And let's see if I can find that list. So this one is running the Limerith Desert Doom and the Inferno of the Starmount. So this one did not go the adventure route. So kind of looking at that space that's going to exist. The only cards that this one has Scorching Dragonfire, which is easily replaceable. We have a lot of options for 3 damage spells right now that are sticking around post rotation. You still have Frostbite. We still have the Faceless Haven Frostbite combo. I mean, plenty of decks are trying to run the Snowland combo, and the rest of the decks besides cards besides Mystical Dispute also stick around. So we have the Auron's Epiphany, which is exactly what this deck is trying to do, is ramp it out and then do an Epiphany, and then you can attack in for lethal easily. It does lose one of its best sideboard cards with Shark Typhoon. It's going to be interesting to see these cards to see if they're able to adjust without just having such an ace up their sleeve against multiple decks in the form of Shark Typhoon. So that will be interesting post-rotation. So this is definitely, many of these cards are cards that I would look at post-rotation. I mean, Goldspan Dragon's already insanely expensive, but the Gallows of Prismari is still not very expensive at all. It's also a pretty good commander card, so it's something you should definitely look to see if it bottoms out, and then it might be a good investable target for post-rotation. Everything here, like I said, sticks around. There's nothing, even the mana base. The mana base sticks around completely. We don't lose anything from the mana base. We don't lose any of the cards here, so this should be a legitimate deck post-rotation. Those are the main cards that I saw starting to see play, but like I said, there's still quite a bit of cards that are on the power level. Well, the thing is, we get a big power reset. Yes, Kaldheim does have some powerful cards in it, so does Zendikar. Actually, Zendikar has a lot of tier 2, tier 3 type style cards that I actually do think might see play. Oh man, there's some of the, what's the Rogue, the 1/3 Death Toucher for each card type in your opponent's. That card looks super good post rotation. It loses a lot of its kind of the hate cards. We still have the Power Word Kill. This is going to be a good replacement card for like Heartless Axe, so it's still going to be in the format. Still going to be a lot of good removal spells, so it's still going to be a very high power leveled standard in the scope of things is if we compare it to standards of the yesteryear. But all in all, we are losing the most powerful sets. Like Throne of Eldraine is arguably the best Pioneer set ever. And I would say that both Ikoria, M21, and Theros Beyond Death had power level, like highest power level cards that we've had in a long time that were kind of sandwiched in between those sets, or in those sets. as well. So we are getting a major power reset, unless Innistrad is crazy, but we should open up the space for a lot of decks. No ultimatums, no companions, especially Lurrus. I mean, Lurrus was very backbreaking with many decks building around Lurrus. No Bone Crusher Giant. That whole Adventures. Adventures has been such a plague on Standard because they've just been so good comparatively to every other card. I mean, it's a 2-for-1, and a lot of times those cards were more pushed than even cards. I mean, a 4-3 for 3 is just exceptional. A 5-5 for 3 is insanely good, and neither one of them had any drawbacks. They just had, huge upsides to them. Yeah, there was one other deck. I wonder if these Winotas have been updated. There are some Winotas that are running the Prosperous Innkeeper. Yeah, this one's kind of interesting too because it creates a treasure token. So now it's super consistent with Winota, getting Winota out with its mana. And then between the Magda and the Prosperous Innkeeper with these Jasper Sentinels, you're going to be able to get out the Winota very quickly and do some shenanigans. So that was another one that I did see play. There was like a mono blacklist as well that was running the new 1-drop zombie. When it dies, -1/-1 to a creature. Let's see if I can find that one real quick. Saw it earlier. I think this is mono black deck. This one was kind of interesting here with the the Shambling Ghast. And the thing is, this does lose a lot of its support cards with its sacrifice outlets, so I'll have to wait and see if those things are going to be something that are replaceable. We do also have an option with another animation land in black, too, that I think is going to be interesting for all of these decks. So we got one in every color, which actually gives aggro and mid-range a lot more toolboxes against the control decks going forward. Control loses a lot of really good cards. Shark Typhoon, if you're in blue. It loses, it still has the Blood Chief's Thirst, and it still has now Power Word Kill, but it loses Heartless Act. Does it lose? Yeah, it does lose Extinction Event, but it keeps the other one. So there are a lot of holes right now that do need to be filled for Innistrad if we're going to have such an oppressive control. That's what's been so rough about this particular standards. You need to go either really insanely aggro or mid-range, or if you're in the mid-range type strategy, you still have to be incredibly aggressive and have that value. But it has been kind of a 2 format, just super aggro versus ultimatum, and we have sometimes Prismari mixing in there and some other ones, but it's been very dominated by those kind of 2 extremes for a while. So I typically don't like Standard 2. I mean, I'll have to rant about it again. I still feel like that there are a lot of cards that have been printed out in this set which were must-answer haymakers. I don't really like playing Magic where it's haymaker after haymaker after you must answer. The thing is, the control is insanely good still right now in Standard. And so you do have the answers. It's not like you don't have the answers for the Embercleaves or these other haymakers. The problem is if you don't have those answers, you just get blown out. And there's a lot of high risk, not really even high risk, high reward, just high reward cards, like these high octane cards, these haymakers you throw out and will win the game within a few turns if you don't answer them. And I typically don't like the standards that are I kind of miss Siege Rhino standards, because Siege Rhinos they really drew out those games to where you had to play a lot more, tit for tat, and actually had to play a lot more skill-based Magic, in my opinion, than what we see in Standard. But again, that's a whole rant video for another day. So anyway, I'll probably do a companionship video for this when I get some time for Rogue Market of what cards I think are very good specs in the post-rotation as far as what is starting to materialize here with the Standard meta. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.